You will need your team. You do not need to do this alone. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, we really need our teams. I think there's a few things about fertility processes that we don't think about them the way we think of like pregnancy or labor or postpartum. When we're talking about being pregnant, we often talk about, oh, what's your plan? Who's there to support you? What phone numbers do you have to call? Like postpartum, everyone should have the phone numbers for their doctors and the phone numbers for their midwife. But we don't talk about that with fertility. And I think because of it, it feels so much more isolating. And I think we need to start thinking about fertility in the same way we think about pregnancy and postpartum as this thing that like needs community, needs support.
Welcome to my fertility podcast, Superhumans, the show that brings you expert insights, personal stories, and the latest in fertility care all in one place.
Whether you're starting your fertility journey, navigating challenges, or just exploring your options, we're here to empower you with knowledge, support, and hope.
Join us as we dive deep into topics that matter most, from IVF and fertility treatments to mental health and wellness.
I'm Dr. Mavis Garcia.
And I'm Dr. Wise. We're two of the fertility specialists at Markham Fertility Centre in Markham, Ontario, Canada. Think of us as your sisters in all things fertility. Let's demystify the world of fertility together. June is Pride Month, a time to celebrate, uplift, and advocate for the 2SLGBTQ+ community. At Markham Fertility Centre, we are proud to support individuals and couples of all gender identities and sexual orientations on their journey to building a family. Whether through donor sperm, donor eggs, reciprocal IVF, surrogacy, fertility preservation, we are committed to removing barriers, honoring diverse family structures, and ensuring every patient is seen, heard, and respected. Love makes a family, and we're here for all of them. Today, we welcome Laine to our show. Laine Halpern Zisman, PhD, is a certified fertility support practitioner and full spectrum doula, helping people navigate all stages of their perinatal journeys. She's currently the Director of Training and Education at Birthmark and an Adjunct Assistant Professor at the School of Public Health and Social Policy at the University of Victoria. Laine is also the author of Conceivable, a guide to making 2S LGBTQ+ family. For more information about Laine or this incredible book, please check out our show notes and you can find out where you can purchase it.
Hi, Laine. Welcome to my fertility podcast. I'm so glad that you're finally here. You and I met at Queen's Park, right?
Yeah.
When we went there to make the announcement that Ontario was going to get more extra funding. The minister was there and you and I struck a conversation. You told me about your book. I bought it the next day and then we connected. We're also together on the board of Conceivable Dreams. So yeah, I am excited to have you here and share with our audience so many things about the book that you wrote, as well as your experience working with the 2S LGBTQ+ community. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start by telling the audience who you are and what you do and why you do what you do.
My name is Laine Halpern Zisman. I am a full spectrum doula and fertility support practitioner. And that means that I support people in navigating their family building journeys, whatever that might look like. So my background is actually, my PhD is actually in sexual diversity studies and theater, which is an odd change of events that happened. When my partner and I decided we wanted to build our families, we realized there really wasn't a lot of information out there of how to navigate that journey. And like any normal person would, I took that as an opportunity to go out and get certified as a full spectrum doula and to start work in the fertility support so that I could help other people in kind of navigating their next steps. And that really changed the course of my academic work as well. I, after that, got a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Victoria, studying sexual and reproductive health and doing research in that area. And then decided that I really wanted to share the work that I was doing in a different medium and decided to create a book. So I wrote the book very much in conversation with the practical work that I was doing as a fertility support practitioner and really working with community members to see what information they wanted to know and they weren't getting elsewhere, particularly in the context of Canada. Because there are other books out there for 2S LGBTQ family building, but not in the context of this country and navigating the process in this country.
Hello. Very excited to have you here on the podcast. In terms of the book Conceivable, how did your personal experiences as a queer person, as somebody who's an educator, as somebody who works in the birthing field, how did that kind of influence the content in the book and the tone of the book? And how did you feel that that interplay came together?
One of the things that I learned very early on in my work with 2S LGBTQ community members is that no one's journey is the same, right? My
Mm,
experience is going to be so different from any of the clients that I work with, from any of the community members that I speak with. Even if it looks like we might have similar experiences, in practice,
mhm,
it's going to be totally different. So, one of the things that I really wanted to do in the book was to allow people to kind of map their own journeys and to feel seen in that without being prescriptive or trying my best not to make assumptions about their experiences and really not to think about how my family's personal journey might be mirrored in their experiences because in the work that I do, I've seen that it's so different, right? So my personal experience is really what like ignited my desire to write the book and to do this work. And then beyond that, I really try to bracket my personal experience and to recognize that the things that I go through, while they might give me some insight into people's experiences, are not universal and everyone really has their own experience. So when I was writing the book, I really wanted to help people feel seen as a whole person and their whole experience as unique to them.
I can really see that. I can see that. I haven't read the book. I think from being a reader that you have accomplished that. One of the things that I love about the book is that it isn't like a traditional linear book with chapters,
Yeah.
like that you have to read cover to get it. It's more like a guide or an invitation. There are spaces in the book for doing some doodling. There are spaces for journaling. There's a lot of questions that invites the reader to think maybe in a way they haven't thought about before. It's like having a doula with you or a companion or somebody along for the journey. And the style of writing I found beautiful writing, but it's also one of the things I liked about it is that it really ignites reflection. So it's not like I'm the expert, let me tell you how it's gonna go type of book. It's more like these are all the things that you should be thinking about because these are kind of the things that can come up in your journey. And I really like that. Another thing that I loved is the letters that you write in the book. So you have some letters to children that aren't born yet, you have letters to intended parents. So I can see now, having heard you talk about the book and having read the book, I'm putting the two pieces together. And I think that you really did accomplish that very well. So,
Thank
congratulations.
you. Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things for me was that I really did want it to be as interactive as possible. And I worked with a friend of mine, Kelsey Vivash, who did the illustrations in the book
Mhm.
to really create something that people felt wasn't precious. I didn't want them to feel like, oh, I can't bring this book with me or I can't get this book dirty. Like, no, you're supposed to work with this book. You know, this book is something you take with you. It's not something that you have to treasure. It's something that you should be writing in, like, you should be interacting with it. And in that way, I think I'm really trying to get to the point of that building your family is relational, right? And so it's relational with any co parents or partners or donors or whoever, doctors or doulas. It's relational in conversation. So I wanted the book to be part of that relationship, right? You get to talk with the book. You get to kind of set the tone. And I think the funny thing about it is one of the reasons why I really wanted the book to have that component is that when I was younger, like a child, My mom bought us, me and my sister, all these books of going through puberty, and you would write in them about your puberty journey, like getting your period and all those things. And I remember it so well, and it meant so much to me because you get to have this conversation with this book. And then even like looking back when I'm older at it, you're like, oh, yeah, that was that feeling. And this is what happened. And so I was like, yeah, I want this to be like that. Like, I want there to be
Oh,
that,
yeah.
like I remember having those books. And as adults, we should have those books too, like
Yeah. Mhm.
we should have that opportunity to have that kind of personal engagement. So that's
Yeah.
really why I decided I wanted to do it because of my mom.
Oh, I love
Aw.
that so much. That's great. And I mean, everybody who knows me knows that I'm big into journaling. So that idea, it really spoke to me. I know when I was going through my own journey, I used to write letters to my unborn children, the children that I desire in my heart. And yeah, I think there is something very special about that, about, talking to your higher self, talking to your future self, talking to your past self, talking to the dreams and making them come alive and real and that, interacting with those things. So I love that. That's great. One thing that I want to comment is this book, obviously, and you can tell me, was intended for members of the 2S LGBTQ community because obviously they have specialized needs in terms of building their family. Many of them need intended parents or donors or surrogates. And so the book really addresses a lot of those things. But there is a lot of things about the book that are universal to anybody trying to build a family as well, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Were
Yes.
you trying to directly specific to one group, or were you aware that there were a lot of similarities between heterosexual couples and members of the LGBTQS community?
Yeah. All of our families are different, right? Like, regardless of who a parent is or how, like, all of our families are different. So, there definitely is a through line that connects to a lot of families. In the book, the second chapter is really focused on 2S LGBTQ barriers and like the histories around that. The guide itself, like those interactions, I think the rest of the book does apply to people throughout our like very diverse communities and families. And I think there are ways for people to connect with it across the board. So many people use surrogates, so many people use
That's right.
donors, so
Yeah.
many
Mhm.
people are single parents by choice. And I think that anyone can use this book for that, for
Mhm.
sure. We can create a more universal design if we kind of start with the marginalized voices and reach out from there. Again, we
Right.
are highlighting and elevating those stories, but recognize how those stories or those strategies or that planning can apply to other populations as well.
The book is fabulous, and the format made me feel like I have a fertility doula in my pocket, basically. And I'm sure a lot of people felt that way. Have you had readers come back to you and share stories, or have you heard what other readers maybe are doing or writing or journaling in their books?
I've had a really positive response, which is so wonderful. I have people saying, "Oh, this is what I really need, and this is so helpful."
Mhm.
And then I have people saying, "I wish I had this a year ago. This is incredible." It fills such a huge gap. So a lot of people who are reading it already have gone through their journeys and are talking about how this applied to them so closely and helps them with their second journeys even. Like people who have
Mhm.
gone through it and are going through it again are finding it really valuable. I'd say that like one of the best things that's come out of it is that more folks have been coming to our support group. So I run a support group once a month with Birthmark called Planting the Seed. And it is a wonderful free support group for 2S LGBTQ people at any stage of their family building journeys. So we have folks who are coming who are just starting to think about starting their family. And then we have folks who are coming who already have kids and are thinking about the next ones. And then we even have people who have completed their families, but they come back as kind of peer support and to be there for other community members. And I think that is like one of the best parts of the book is that it is drawing people to community, right? It's showing people that community exists. There are ways to find other community members and there are networks of support that exist. Actually, the second last chapter is called What I Wish I Knew. And it's written by folks from that support group, sharing the things that they wish that their other community members knew, they wish that their doctors knew, and just this kind of like little information that you wouldn't get from elsewhere, that you might not know about, that you might not come across without this book or without a network or community of support.
For our listeners who are maybe now intrigued about this support group, how can they get more information, potentially join?
Yeah, for sure. It's on the Birthmark website. If you go to birthmarksupport.com, it's planting the seed. It runs the second Tuesday of every at 7 p.m. online, and it's such a great community.
Perfect. Amazing. I'm sure there's going to be a huge uptick after this podcast comes out.
One of the things that you mention in the book is the four truths of family building. And having been a fertility patient and a fertility specialist for now well over 10 years, going up to 15, honestly, I couldn't agree more. And before I read the book, if somebody said to me, what are the four truths of starting a family? I'll be like, there's like 100 million truths that I could tell you. But you did such a good job at narrowing it down to four universal truths. So can we go through them? I'm going to say the first truth is your journey has already begun. Can you talk on that? Because I agree so much with this one.
So when I came up with the book, this was kind of the impetus for the book. The book is called Conceivable because I really believe that your journey begins as soon as you conceive of your family, as soon as you start thinking about it. One of the things in the LGBTQ community, and also true of folks who are planning to use donor gametes or use a surrogate or going through their process, if you don't have all of the materials you need readily available, if you don't have eggs or you don't have sperm or you don't have a uterus available to you, there's a lot of work and labor that goes into building your family before you even get that first try. And so for a lot of people, it feels like their journeys are invalidated or that labor doesn't count until they have sperm and egg and uterus coming together, right? And that's really exhausting. So I really want to validate for people that your journey begins as soon as you start thinking about that family, that labor, that work, that process, that counts, right? Because when we feel like it doesn't count, it's really hard. It's really emotionally difficult to feel like you're doing all this work and you haven't even tried, quote unquote. So I think just validating for people, your journey has already begun if you even just thought of creating that family.
That makes perfect sense. And from my own experience, I remember being 16 and, of course, not wanting to have kids at 16, but already thinking about what is that going to be like and who am I going to meet and what are they going to look like? And then continue to think. And then as you get older, then obviously you start thinking about contraception and you start thinking about, your health overall. And then eventually you start trying, but you're right, you have all of those things. But even outside of my own experience, I have patients who have come, for egg freezing. And then years later, they finish a career and they meet somebody. And now they're trying with this person and it's not working out and they need to do this and that. So you're absolutely right. Just because one piece of the puzzle isn't there, it doesn't mean you aren't already working on your puzzle. And in the podcast, when we talk about fertility preservation, yeah, freezing eggs is one thing, but health and making sure that you're taking all the steps to support a healthy pregnancy in the future is also something we talk about. So I love this idea that for anybody, men or women or whoever you identify, if you're thinking that you want to be a parent in any way, shape, or form, even just as an intended parent, there are so many pieces that you're thinking about before you even get to that big stage. And I love the way you conceptualize that. You're right. The idea that it doesn't count because you haven't put an embryo in yet, it makes a lot of sense to that people will feel invalidated.
Especially when there is wait lists, when a patient is going to their GP and finding out what fertility clinic to go to and waiting for a consult and waiting for their first appointment and waiting for funding to come in. Like that is a long time to have a lot of really big emotions and a lot of confusion maybe or a lot of choices, a lot of money being spent. And so that part, that year or 2 years of just anticipation, I think it's important that we validate that as work, as labor, as validating it as part of your family building journey.
Absolutely. The second truth, which again, I couldn't agree more, is expect the unexpected.
Yeah. So people come in, they're like, oh, I'm going to get pregnant in January. My kid is going to be this zodiac sign. They're going to have this horoscope. This is what's going to, and you're like, oh, okay, and what if that doesn't happen? Like, how can we plan for all the things that come up,
Right.
So even working with folks who are like, oh, this person is going to be my donor, or I'm going to use this person as a surrogate. How can we plan and have a strategy for when the unexpected happens? Because we can't know what surprises are going to pop up. We can't know what the unexpected turns are going to be. But if we think in advance about the challenges that might arise, we can plan for ourselves some strategies for how we want to cope with change. So, what is supportive for you when the original plan you envisioned can't come to pass? What are the steps that you might take? So, really helping people through that process of not just expecting the unexpected, but also planning for self care and family care if the unexpected arises.
That is an absolute universal life truth. Can I just
Yes.
say that? Let's take a moment here. Fertility, yeah, but that is life in and of itself. Expect the unexpected. And it is absolutely universal. I mean, we can all think of life examples, but in the fertility world as well, the number of patients who I speak with who just assume that things are just going to work, regardless of their situation, regardless of how they identify, because they're healthy, because they exercise, because of this, that, the other thing. And then I also think it speaks to this generational idea of that I see from a lot of patients will reference if you work hard enough, you can achieve something.
Mhm.
I like that
Yeah.
understanding, like, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's something in the millennial mindset. Because again, a lot of our patients are sort of in that millennial stage of
Mm.
life right now, that generation, given kind of current time. And I wonder whether it's been something that's been so intrinsically taught or something that we've sort of internalized that if you work hard enough, you can achieve something. And that goes very much against this idea of expect the unexpected.
Mhm.
That, if I take enough vitamins, if I exercise enough, if I eat enough kale, if I get good enough sleep score, if my Apple Watch is like happy with me because I'm getting steps with it, it's not reminding me to stand up. One of my personal pet peeves. But that's not how fertility works for anyone, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's a really, really important point, that along with expect the unexpected, and that the unexpected is okay, and that the unexpected is not a reflection of you. It's not a personal failing in any way. And it doesn't reflect on your behaviors or doesn't make you a bad person or that, that you should regret the certain things you did. It's really that the unexpected can happen to anyone at any time in ways that, I mean, I wish as a fertility doctor I could predict, but Dr. Garcia and I both know that there's lots of things that happen that are unexpected along someone's fertility journey and that we certainly can't predict, we can't account for. And I think it's especially difficult truth right now in this big bulk of millennials that we're seeing. What do you think, Dr. Garcia?
Oh, yeah, I would agree with you. I personally have a hard time with expecting the unexpected because I'm a classic millennial. Like, you work hard, you get the things. Here's a program,
You're
here's a
the
plan.
classic trying everything biohacker,
Yeah,
podcast listener, supplement, health trend
that's right.
follower. Let's be honest here, guys.
I think that there's a term for people like me. I think they're called the optimizers.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah.
But okay, so enough about me. Let's talk about the third truth, which I'm actually gonna read from your book. Is that okay, Laine, if I read
Go
quote by
for
quote the
it.
book? The third truth is you're stronger with your team. The truth about family building is that we need teams, we need community, and we need you. We need to remember that the technical stuff, the first steps, the next steps, and the medications, the conversations are just the beginning, even when they feel like an end. Your team, your chosen family, your expanded network, your doctors, providers, caregivers, aunties, friends, non human furry connections, your books, your music, your creations, your inspirations, you need them all. Your team is alive and shifting. They are the people and the things that make you feel in good company. You will need them now as you begin, and you will need them then as you navigate pregnancy and parenthood. You will need them as advocates, tender ears to listen, people to scream, rage, and celebrate with. You will need your team. You do not need to do this alone. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, we really need our teams. I think there's a few things about fertility processes that we don't think about them the way we think of like pregnancy or labor or postpartum. When we're talking about being pregnant, we often talk about, oh, what's your plan? Who's there to support you? What phone numbers do you have to call? Like postpartum, everyone should have the phone numbers for their doctors and the phone numbers for their midwife. But we don't talk about that with fertility. And I think because of it, it feels so much more isolating. And I think we need to start thinking about fertility in the same way we think about pregnancy and postpartum as this thing that like needs community, needs support. So I always tell people have a list of phone numbers. When you start with a fertility clinic, find out who you call in case of emergency. If there's an urgent question, you want their phone number written down somewhere so clearly so that you know where it is, so that your partner knows where it is, so that if something happens, you know who to call, right? And if your clinic isn't open, then who do you call next? Can you call telehealth? What are the phone numbers that you need available to you? What are the comforts that you need available to you? Who are the people that you can rely on? Let's make lists in advance of this is what support looks like for all parents involved, not just for the gestational parent or gestational carrier, also for non gestational parents. Like, who do you need on your team? Who can you go to when you're stressed out? What feels good? All those things we need in our fertility process. And it makes such a big difference to feel that community because when we're stressed out, when we're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, we're not like, oh, what's that phone number I should call? Or who's that person? So if we have it written down and you can just say, okay, here are my next steps. Here are my resources. Here are the phone numbers I should call. That's so helpful when you're feeling really big emotions or really anxious or really scared.
That's why I wanted to read it word by word because I could not possibly say it better than you have in this book. I get really excited when patients come with a friend or their sisters or their moms. It's really a different dynamic. Usually, when it's a partner, which is obviously great, but they're both patients, they're both sort of in the same space. And sometimes having somebody outside of that space come with the patients at the procedure, it creates a whole different shift in energy because it's someone who hasn't been going through the struggle, who is just genuinely excited for you, regardless of whatever conversations the doctor may have had about, your age and your ex and things like that. So I couldn't agree more that people need to think in teams. And again, like Dr. Weiss was saying, these truths apply to life. Talking about being an optimizer, there's one thing I've learned in my 47 years of life is you gotta have your sisters. I call them my sisters. You gotta have your team to back you up in whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish.
When I'm talking to patients, I'm a very visual person. That is how my brain functions. And so I always tell people, even if your, let's say, IVF cycle or your fertility treatment goes perfectly, right? Everything kind of goes according to the textbook. There are still moments where you're going to have big emotions. I can practically guarantee it, right? When people say, how can I prepare for IVF? I say, plan for those big emotions and what you're going to do. Because when you're in it, the visual I use is like, you are in a hole. You are below ground level. You are in a hole and all you see is the dirt wall in front of you. Instead of now trying to build a ladder to get yourself up out of the hole to see the forest ahead, do that before. Like if you know when your embryo transfer is, you know that there's the 2-week wait. Plan things now. Book your session with a therapist. Make date night with your partner. Make a lunch date with friends. Buy that book that you really wanted to read and wait to read it during that 2 week. Like make a plan for those things now to deal with that before, because right now you're not in the hole and you're able to see things. So plan ahead, because as I said, even if everything goes perfectly, you're still going to have those big emotions, and completely valid, 100% valid. But if you are in a better headspace to prepare for those things, make plans for those things, think about those things. And I love that idea of comparing it to that emergency list or emergency tree, right? With all those important numbers, to think about it that way, that's perfect. It's absolutely true. Again, universal for sure.
Yeah, and there's so much waiting. I think people, when they're thinking about IVF, they don't always think about the amount of time there is of just waiting. And that can evoke a lot of feelings of helplessness and vulnerability. Because when you're stimming, you're like, oh, I'm doing this thing. And you're like trying to see how many eggs are going to be retrieved.
Yeah.
And then people aren't planning for those 5 days, right? When they're going to get these updates. Those 5 days are so difficult. There's so much feelings of fear and helplessness. And so planning in advance, who can you go to for support? What feels good? How can you talk to your co-parents or partners about this? Like that I think is so important to think about in advance. Not just how am I going to feel during stimming or how am I going to feel during the 2-week wait? Like each step has moments where you can kind of plan for what support looks like.
100%.
The fourth truth was a little bit harder to read, being a member of the fertility industry and a fertility care provider, but honest. And it would be naive of me to think that it isn't a thing, right? Because it is. And that is that oppression and inequity impact 2LGBTQ plus fertility care. So I do want to spend a little bit more time on this one. And then you have the second chapter that talks about barriers and talks about the history. I learned quite a bit there because it goes into fertility industry as a system, and systems inherently have, problems with them. Can we elaborate on that? Can we talk about some of the barriers that you see for members of this community in fertility care?
Yeah, for sure. The first thing I'll say is that I do think that clinics and doctors and nurses are all well intentioned. I don't think anyone is coming out and being like, I want people to have a hard time, right? I also think it's true that our healthcare system is designed with a particular population, our whole healthcare system with a particular population in mind, and that people from marginalized communities are disenfranchised and have higher health disparities and because of the social determinants of health. We know that there is an impact on 2S LGBTQ people and their health outcomes. So even while well-intentioned, a lot of 2S LGBTQ people are navigating systems that are not created with them in mind, and they're feeling that. That can take effect and that can kind of manifest in a lot of different ways. One is a lack of transparency. Where do you start? What questions do you ask? What are your options? Another is the cost, the high cost of fertility care, which is often where 2S LGBTQ people have to start. Research shows that obviously that is a constraint, that there's a huge financial barrier. That means that only some families are able to grow their families. Only people with that kind of massive amounts of money at their disposal are able to build their families. And that's a really big concern. And then I think there's also just a lack of training in healthcare provider training. I think we do have, one-off webinars or continuing ed courses, and it's not enough. There has been some really interesting research that looks at how trans folks encounter the medical system in Canada. And there's a great stat that I quote in the book that talks about how trans and non-binary people experience less eye contact from their doctors. That doctors feel that they have less eye contact with their transgender or non-binary patients at least some of the time. And the reason why that statistic is so important to me is because I think trans and non-binary people feel quite unseen in their care. And this is the physical manifestation of that, of being
Right.
unseen.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, it's
That is blowing my mind.
yeah.
They say, or, we've heard feeling unseen, but it's like literal. I did not realize that at all.
Yeah, it's a
Wow.
2021 article by Laine Halpern that looks at trans care in Canadian systems, and they say that 21% of respondents described having less eye contact. 21%, that's a
Wow.
high
Yeah.
percentage of people noting that, right? So I think that that's something that we can really keep in mind. I really believe that when people don't feel confident giving care, it's often because they don't have the training for it. They don't have the knowledge. They're just not as secure in delivering that care. So I do
Right.
think that a huge part of that is about education and really providing folks with education and knowledge for caring for diverse populations. And I think that providing information to community members, to 2S LGBTQ community members of where they can get support, where they can ask questions to, that can allow them to have that kind of support that they need. Yeah.
If you had a magic wand, what would you change when it comes to the care of LGBTQ plus community?
There are a number of things that I would change on the community level, on the clinic level, and on the kind of personal level. I think that on the clinical level, we need more education. We need more guidelines for 2S LGBTQ care. One of the things that I'm working on with CFAS, the Canadian Fertility and Andrology Society, we've created a special interest group for 2S LGBTQ
That's right.
fertility. And we're really working hard to fill that gap. So, how can we address the lack of education, the lack of guidelines, the lack of information, and really trying to work with healthcare providers to identify gaps in knowledge, to identify gaps in training, and then to respond to them appropriately. So, I think we really are doing that work. On the community level, I think we need more access and resources for community care. 2S LGBTQ people need each other. They need supports from each other. They need peer supports. And one of the ways that I'm trying to accomplish that is through a new peer support program with Birthmark that we're just starting up. So hopefully that will come into fruition. And then on the one-on-one level, really giving people the tools to advocate for themselves. So one of the things I work on with our community members is identifying when something they're being told is a Health Canada regulation, is an internal clinic policy, or is maybe like a misunderstanding. So, how can we address each of those things differently? If it's a clinic policy, there might be ways to communicate with the clinic about your needs. If it's a Health Canada regulation, there might be a different kind of approach that we need to take. And if it's a misunderstanding, how can we kind of build that communication? And I think that's really important for people to be able to receive the care that they deserve, to be able to identify what their rights are and what kind of policies exist that they have to navigate.
For our listeners of this podcast, let's say they're part of the LGBTQ plus population and they're listening to this. I mean, first of all, they're all going to go out and they're going to read your book and they're going to join the support group, obviously through Birthmark. But what else can they do, let's say, to help navigate their journey? Let's say maybe they've already started at a fertility clinic and they're kind of into the logistics of the fertility journey at this point. You mentioned the peer support network, but how else can they help their providers to be better, frankly?
One of the things that I think is really important in this journey for every family navigating it is to centralize themselves, because no one else is going to do that, right? This is your story. This is your family that you're creating. And I'll go back to this idea of like labor and delivery. Oftentimes, if you're working with a midwife or with a doula, they'll come up with a birth plan. So, what's your ideal plan? What are your priorities? What are your preferences? What values are you leading with? And what do you want to do to navigate change? And we don't do that with fertility. We don't do this like kind of fertility plan of what are your priorities? What are your values? What is your like absolutely must haves and red flags? So I would say to folks, sit down and do it for yourself and then have your partner do it for themselves and then come together and reflect together of what are your priorities in navigating this journey and what are the values you want to lead with, and share that with your provider. Because oftentimes providers think fastest time to live birth is everyone's goal. But it's not necessarily, right? Fastest time to live birth is one goal, and that might be where someone starts. Or it might be, listen, we really want to use this donor. We really want to use this partner's eggs. And that might shift timelines, right? I think really identifying what it is that you are prioritizing is really key. I really want a non-medicalized approach. And these are the steps that I'll take if that's not possible. Really identifying what is it that you need and you want, and share that with your provider so that you're all coming from the same page. Because if you're coming with different goals or priorities in mind, they might be recommending a protocol that they wouldn't recommend if it was the case that like they knew what your priorities or values are. So really centralize your needs and identify them, identify your preferences, identify what kind of you imagine and what you want to do if you're not able to accomplish that. Because I think sometimes we skip that step and there's an assumption about what the priorities or goals are, and it can make people feel like they're not in control. But if you identify your goals, if you identify your preferences or priorities, then you can keep coming back to them with your provider, right? And then you can come back to that strategy of, okay, if we can't have a non-medicalized approach, I said my next steps would be get a second opinion. Or I said my next step would be press pause for 2 months so I can think about it. Or I said my next step would be try a different donor, right? So we have that kind of laid out as a plan. I think identifying your own preferences and priorities is both a practice for your family and a practice for engaging with your doctor in ways that ensure clear communication and that you are a part of your journey.
And I think the physician can be really helpful in helping to identify what is possible, because starting a conversation, okay, well, what are your preferences? It's like, well, what's possible? You kind of have to lay out the menu almost in a way of donor sperm can look like this, donor egg can look like this, surrogacy can look like this. I think you have to have that very broad conversation about all the things first
Yeah.
to know what's possible, what's out there. And then I feel like the person, plus minus their partner, they need to then go away and come up with that and then come back and talk about kind of preferences. Because it's like, I can imagine if somebody, it's like, well, what's your preference? Like, well, what's possible? What's out there? That can be a really overwhelming thing in and of itself. Because I'm always thinking about what I can do as a fertility care provider to help patients. Maybe it is just laying out the menu and saying, okay, we're going to have a really broad conversation about all the different things and then kind of going into more detail from that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, yes, it definitely has to be in conversation. And I'll give one example of where I think priorities can kind of get misaligned. I have a number of clients who are a partnership where both partners have eggs in a uterus. And they come in with saying, like, okay, this person is going to use their eggs, they're going to use their uterus, they're super excited about this. This is our family unit. And then they go through their testing and they do blood work and ultrasounds, and doctors come back and say, actually, it should be the other way around, and patients are devastated. And the doctor's like, no, this is good. This is good. This is the better candidate. And the patients are like, okay, we'll do that because we want a baby. And they're going home and they're grieving this idea of family that's lost. And they were just told, oh, this is what's going to work. However, their doctors aren't always taking into consideration what the priorities were. And as soon as that patient hears that, they're devastated and they're at a loss and they don't know what to do. And the question is really, what would that doctor have suggested if it was just one person with an egg and uterus coming in? Would they have said, oh, you need a donor, you need a surrogate? Or would they have said, okay, let's try these different steps, right? So it's
Right.
really laying out the possibilities and asking, what is your priority? Because if the priority is fastest live birth, great, then maybe they're comfortable switching up roles. If the priority is this is how we envision our family, then we really want to lean into that and allow space for options and different protocols that might make that possible without jumping to this new decision where you might not know what's happening behind closed doors around that grief and mourning for that big change.
That makes perfect
Yeah.
sense. That's a great example. Absolutely. I have another question for you. In writing this book, you met with members of the community, you met with lawyers and other people that provide different services within the community. And you are obviously a member of the community and you're very experienced and you've got lots of exposure to this world. Was there anything that surprised you in writing this book and meeting with all these people, knowing that you've already come from a place of a lot of knowledge and experience in this field?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most surprising thing was that the book didn't exist already. I think
Fair.
that, like, there's so many resources that are available that people don't know about. They're, like, often siloed or hard to find, and I think that that's kind of the most surprising thing is that a lot of services or resources exist and people don't know about them or don't know how to access them, and kind of bringing them together was a really good opportunity to show people what they might look for, what support might look like, and, like, the kinds of people that they could reach out to and speak with. I think that's probably one of the most surprising things is just, like, what is available and how hard it is to find.
That's a really, really good point about the siloed, that there are support groups, that there are things out there, but that they are siloed. And it is kind of difficult to bring them all together. Because frankly, I'd say, myself as a fertility physician, if a patient sort of point blank asked me for resources, I mean, obviously I would now recommend the book, but before reading the book, I'd be like, I'll get back to you on that one. which is unfortunate. And again, that's something that I should be prepared with as a fertility physician for sure for that question.
Well, and I think that like we don't always know the resources that are available, and they're not available to everyone. And depending on our location, like,
Yeah.
folks who are in urban city centers like Toronto have available a lot more resources than folks who are in more rural areas. Our group actually opened up nationally now. We have like folks coming from Newfoundland and from Vancouver, and we used to be Toronto or GTHH specific. So we are opening things up because we recognize that we want to be able to offer more resources. I will say that some resources are harder to find. Resources for non-gestational parents are really difficult to find, and I think we need more of that. That's one of the reasons I had the beginning of the book a letter to a non-gestational parent, because I think sometimes we see non-gestational parents as support people instead of parents in their own right, and we really need to kind of shift that framework so that we see non-gestational parents as full parents, as people who are fully engaged in the process and might also experience perinatal mental health needs that need to be addressed. So I think just having that full scope of family is really important for resources as well.
So, Laine, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I want to ask you one last question before you go. And given that you are a member of this community, given that you've written this precious book, can you tell us one piece of advice, wisdom, truth, like you called them in the book, or message that you want to leave the members of the 2S LGBTQ plus community as they embark on their family building journey? Parting
Definitely.
words.
I think one of the things that is really important to identify is that it is okay to experience multiple emotions at the same time. We can be vulnerable and scared and also hopeful and excited. And sometimes being hopeful and excited is the most vulnerable feeling. And I want to make space for that complexity of being able to hold multiple emotions at the same time. As you build your family, know that there is support, that it is okay to feel rage, to feel scared, to feel frustrated. And it's also okay to feel gratitude and hope and excitement. And none of those emotions have to sit on their own. They can all be complexly layered together, and that there is support for building your family. There is ways to navigate this system, and there's ways to find answers to your questions. And there are no silly questions. So you should always feel comfortable to ask any of the questions that you have to your providers or to your community so that you can make informed decisions about your care.
And everyone should read your book.
Yeah, feel free to read the book.
And listen, I said everyone should read the book. Yes, it is geared for people in 2S LGBTQ plus community, but these four truths, they're universal, right? There's a lot of unique experience, but there's a lot of universality in the experience as well. And so I think everyone should read your book.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laine, for spending this time with us and sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and your book. Whenever I hear about reading a book, I think, oh gosh, another book I have to read. But this is not a read a book thing. This is a companion. This is an invitation to think and journal. And you can read the last chapter and then go back and read the first chapter and then read the middle chapter. So don't be intimidated by the term read a book, because it's not your classic read a book experience. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that was the goal. I'm glad it worked.
You nailed it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm just curious. So what's next for you?
Up next is continuing to support 2S LGBTQ people in their family building journeys. And now I'm working with Birthmark on the Reproductive Health Equity Project, which is a healthcare provider training. We're creating an online platform training healthcare providers across the perinatal spectrum on how to work with marginalized communities. So look out for that.
Is there another book coming?
Maybe.
And that's a wrap for today, Superhumans.
If you're looking to connect, get social with us. Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at My Fertility Podcast, or visit us online at markhamfertility.com. And don't forget, follow, subscribe, and share your favorite episode.
Thanks for listening to My Fertility Podcast and for being a vital part of our community. We know you've got this.
We're signing off until next Tuesday.
If you found this episode of My Fertility Podcast helpful, please take a moment to head over to the review section and leave us your thoughts. Your reviews and comments are incredibly valuable to us and help guide future episodes. We also welcome you to direct your questions to info@myfertilitypodcast.com.
My Fertility Podcast is produced by Rabbit Media Inc. in conjunction with Dr. Garcia and Dr. Weiss.
Music by Mixkit. Life is a Dream by Michael Ramirez C.
My Fertility Podcast is not intended to replace any type or variation thereof professional medical, health, or legal advice, nor should the content be taken as medical advice. Please contact your primary healthcare professional regarding any medical questions you may have. The information presented in this podcast is based on the knowledge and understanding of the host at the time of recording. Medical knowledge is constantly evolving, and new research may change the understanding of health-related topics. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, we do not guarantee the completeness, accuracy, or timeliness of the content. The views expressed in this podcast by guests are not those of the host or the management. This podcast is not intended to impose any type of discrimination. My Fertility Podcast and its management are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast.